Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. This is going to be a great Arizona Unit 9 elk hunting recap with Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. And I was able to catch up with Chris as he was driving back from Unit 9 back home. And we have a real good conversation. Towards the end of the conversation, his phone ends up breaking up, going out of service. But we get some real good discussion here. I think you guys are going to enjoy this episode. Don't forget rowhuntingresources.com. I get a lot of great feedback from listeners, how much they enjoy that. Chris offers a 20% discount for you guys that sign up, the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners that sign up. I believe his promo code is J. Scott Podcast. You get 20% off. Also, guys, GoHunt.com Insider is doing their 30-day free trial for the J. Scott Outdoors listeners. And all you have to do is go to GoHunt.com/JScott and follow the prompts, and you get a full access for 30 days to the GoHunt Insider. Gotten tons of feedback from listeners how much they enjoy Go Hunt Insider. So go check that out. And I want to thank my additional sponsors, the Outdoorsman's, who's having a huge sale with Swarovski Optic right now, and Phone Scope and Real Game Calls. Guys, let's get right to this episode with Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. I thank you guys so much for your support of this podcast. You can go to my website, jscottoutdoors.com. That has link outs to the podcast, to all my social media. You can send me an email through the website as well, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for all the hashtags on Instagram, hashtagging JScottOutdoors and JScott Outdoors Podcast. And thanks for all the pictures and testimonials from all the value you guys have gotten with the podcast. Let's just get right to this episode. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources, and Chris is actually in the truck driving back to Kansas. He's been in Arizona, was in Colorado chasing bulls, and then spent the last couple weeks in Arizona chasing elk in Unit 9. Anxious to hear how the season went for you. Chris, how you doing?
Doing all right, my friend. How are you?
Oh, doing pretty good. I'm dying to know how the rut was in Arizona and what you experienced. What were your overall thoughts of how this year went as far as the rut, having been there for several seasons?
Well, last year we all thought it was tough. There was some, just the way the weather was and everything else. But to be honest with you, I think this year was even tougher than what we saw last year. I mean, it was, well, just for instance, I was with one of our buddies up there last night, September 29th at 9 p.m., up in the middle of some of the best area in the unit, and we did not hear a cricket. I mean, it was dead quiet. I mean, it was just I was up there for 3 weeks, and it's just been a grind to try to find bulls that were not only vocal, that ended up wanting to play. I mean, it was a brutally tough season. I mean, you'd go to one spot and you could not even find, I mean, you'd be lucky to find a good fresh track, and then you literally drive down the road and you jump into the middle of just a flurry of bugling, and then that flurry would die down, and then just crickets after that. So it was definitely a tough and interesting season. Did not get near the video footage that I was hoping to get, but heck, I was still in the woods. I was still in Unit 9, so I can't complain. I was happy.
What factors do you think played the biggest role or played a role in the rut just being lackluster?
And again, Jay, this is my opinion, and I know that there might be some people that don't want to hear this, but I'm just going to express my opinion. First and foremost, I think it's something that none of us have control over. I think the weather. Now, you guys have better information than I do, but from everything that I was told and what I saw on the ground as far as grass condition, it seems like there was a lack of rain early and midsummer, and then, the unit got some rain late. Well, the areas that got rain late, at least some of the blue grama grasses, for those not familiar, you got two different types of grasses. You got cool season grasses that grow when the weather's cool in the spring, and it grows in the spring and the fall as long as there's moisture. Then you have the warm season grasses like blue grama grass that grow in the heat of the summer, but they do need some moisture. Well, those grasses are what a lot of the elk up there, it's got good protein, and that just really packs on the antlers, and it provides a lot of good forage for cows that are lactating and bringing up calves. So it seems like that grass did not do well in a lot of the areas across the unit early on, and it only bumped up later in the summer. And then then the other flip side of that too was this year there was a pile of cattle all through the unit. From border to border, corner to corner. There was cattle everywhere. And so even the good spots that had grass, the cattle were in there just taking it out. So I think this is, again, my opinion. I talk about this on the website with the Rethinking the Rut series. There's only one real factor that helps delay estrus cycling, and that is whether or not the cows have adequate body fat, whether they have adequate body condition to allow them to come into estrus. And I think in some cases, for a lot of those cows, I think maybe they had poor body condition coming into, and maybe they weren't skin and bones, but they just did not have the level of body fat that they needed coming into September to allow them to cycle on an either early or a normal cycle. It seems like maybe a few of those cows were just starting to come in late because for what I saw, the bulk of the time when I got on a bull that was locked down with a cow, and I say that very specifically, and we'll touch on that, a cow, okay, that cow did not have a calf. Or if that cow had a calf, it was a very large, older calf, okay? So the calf looked like it was healthy and probably weaned, all right? But any of the other groups of cows I got into that had a bull where the cows were in there, they were smaller calves, that there was just nothing going on. The bull was just kind of milling around with the cows, and it just really wasn't fired up. So I think maybe part of what we saw was due to we just had some poor forage condition, maybe early in midsummer, and it just kind of suppressed some of the cow body condition. I don't know. But the other factor, and this is something that you and I talked about, I know, you guys, you and Steve Chappell, and I and Steve Chappell have talked about it, and some others. The Unit 9 is changing, and Arizona seems to be treating Unit 9 more for an opportunity hunt than for trophy management, because they've got a lot of late season hunts and additional. There's just all sorts of other seasons going on in that unit. I think we're just seeing a whole scale change in the age structure and the makeup of that unit, to where literally it was crazy this year. I did not see bulls, and I don't care if we're talking about a 300-inch bull or we're talking about a 340 bull. Finding a 350-plus bull was hard. Hard this year. But even the younger age class bulls that were holding cows and that were working cows, seriously, you had 320 bulls and 330 bulls that were the primary herd bull in a lot of these situations. But I did not see any bull defending, courting, or herding. I did not see any bull out there really holding a harem. But instead, I saw individual bulls locked down with one cow or two cows. And literally there might be 8 or 10 other cows around him, but he just absolutely did not care whether another bull came in and took those other cows, whether those cows wandered away from him, whether he wandered away from those cows. He just didn't care about all the other cows. They literally were acting like whitetails, and they were locked down with a single cow that was probably coming into estrus, they would lock down with that one cow. They would follow her around, and then as soon as it was done, they'd just leave. They would just go, and they would either find the rest of the cows and just kind of hang out with them, or they would just wander off and go look for another cow. It really seemed like they were almost acting more like whitetails this year than what your typical quote unquote herd bull that's got whether it's a half a dozen cows, 8 cows, whether he's got 15 cows or whatever. I just did not see herd bulls defending or trying to maintain a harem. When I got it, you guys are the ones that kind of coined the term that meatball, where you get in a whole bunch of bulls bugling, a whole bunch of cows, just a whole bunch of activity. Seriously, every time I got into one of those meatball situations, it literally was just one bull locked down with one cow. There might be a whole bunch of other cows around, but the bulls were ignoring the other cows. They were just all trying to get that one cow that was coming into estrus. So it was a real crazy scenario. I mean, you get this real flash in the pan. You get a situation where they're bugling like crazy, and then all of a sudden they would split up. They take their cows and boop, and then it would be just gone. I mean, crickets for the rest of the day. So it was definitely an interesting season. It just unfortunately just seems like anymore that Unit 9. I mean, we were just talking about this. For those guys that have been putting in for 20 years, wanting to put in for Unit 9, I think people are going to be disappointed. I think Unit 9 anymore is just kind of a mid-tier unit, and it's just the way it's going to be.
I'm curious your thoughts on hunting pressure. I mean, you've been up there for several years. Was the hunting pressure more, less, or the same? What can you say about the people and the camps and people messing with bulls? And was there a lot of pressure? And well, let me ask you one question first. What do you feel about the pressure with the people? Did that play a part in it in your mind?
I think it might have. However, last year you and I saw probably, pretty egregious what I'd call combat bow hunting. Last year we had guys blocking water holes, pretending that they were hunting a water hole, and really they were just sitting there watching it, blocking it for their their clients or other buddies or whatever. I ran into that just very briefly right at the beginning of the season, but I did not see a lot of that. I did not see as much of the quote-unquote combat bow hunting like we did last year. However, it was super, super dry when the season started. And there were a handful of really good bulls taken. I think I know of 3 bulls that were over 370 that were taken early in the season. Now, and there may be 4. There's one that's kind of confusing. There's controversy, whether it was anyway, it doesn't matter. 3 or 4 good bulls that were taken. Everything that was being taken in that first half of the season, well, mostly, but actually that first 10 days of the season, was someone sitting on water. It literally this year, the water was the limiting factor, and there were some water holes that had water early, but again, there were so many cattle in areas where all of a sudden you get 20, 30 cows show up, and they'll suck a tank dry. I mean, it was warm and dry, so some of the tanks did not have water, and they were losing water. So a lot of the outfitters, a lot of the hunters that would scout, they had a water hole that they had pinned down that they wanted to hunt, and then all of a sudden 5 days into the season, it's dry, and now the elk are moved. Well, now it's a mad scramble, trying to find a good water source. And I saw some of the more prominent outfitters in the unit literally were they had blinds on all these prime water holes, and all they did in the morning, they would grab their clients, shuttle them to a water hole, and they just camped on a water hole and just rotated their guys through it into where basically it was, somebody would camp on a water hole and never leave. And so you just, there it is. And so, there's one area up kind of north central part of the unit, there was a trick tank. And for those that are not familiar down here, when you say trick tank, Arizona does a phenomenal job. This is one thing that I will always commend Arizona, and especially the Arizona Elk Society. They do a great job of providing water resources for elk and for wildlife. So some of the water sources are earthen dams, basically earth ponds, Okay, so they're just filled with water, and you got mud and everything else what the elk love. But when those dry up, there are what's called trick tanks or trickle tanks or guzzlers or wildlife waters, whatever you want to call it. But basically there's a steel or concrete apron, big area that catches water, channels it into a storage unit, and then that storage tank will trickle out a little bit of water into a drinker, and that usually will hold water for a very long time, and that's what animals will end up relying on for their water source. Well, there was a trick tank, one of these, north central part of the unit. There was 2 different ground blinds on this trick tank, literally almost set 180 degrees apart from, literally right across from one another. A couple guys got in an argument saying, "You just don't shoot me." So 2 guys are hunting that, and then literally there are guys walking through with bows. It was crazy. It was chaos in a couple of these places because there was only a handful of places that had water where the elk were going to come in. Well, you and I know that 90% of the animals are going to come in the middle of the night, but some people were successful sitting water and even in those high pressure situations. So those were the areas where we had the most conflict because, unfortunately, up until that point, that there was almost no talking. There was almost no bugling whatsoever. It was very difficult to locate animals. It wasn't until we finally kind of started to get towards the end of the bow season, we got some rain, and man, we got a rainstorm, and it just kicked everything in gear. And for all day, that day was rainy and cool and wet, and the elk were active all day. And so we finally had people that, there was bulls talking, bulls working, so people kind of spread out, dissipated, and it was a little bit better. But I think the pressure, again, you've got big outfitters, you've got friends that drew their tag. Again, you got somebody that drew their tag. It took 20 years to draw it. They've got 5 guys that, all their buddies want to come help them. So, yeah, there was a lot of pressure, but it seemed like it was a little bit friendlier, if you will, than maybe what we saw last year. But yeah, it definitely keeps animals locked down. It keeps them, moving at night. And those animals know where the sanctuary areas are, and they just bail. They just bailed. So,
speaking of sanctuary areas, let's actually take a quick break here, and then I've got a question for you. Guys, the title sponsor of my podcast is GoHunt.com Insider, and they're doing a 30-day free trial exclusive for the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners. Go to GoHunt.com/JScott and click on the blue free trial button and go through the steps. It only takes a couple of minutes. You will be required to provide a credit card, but you will not be charged until after the free 30 days. You can cancel at any time within the first 30 days to prevent being charged. If you have any questions at all, you can email freetrial@gohunt.com and someone from the GoHunt team will promptly respond. This is your opportunity to see what all the buzz is about and the filtering 2.0 system and the application strategies for the Western hunter. Reel game calls featuring the elk reel. Reel Game Calls makes innovative, realistic, and easy-to-master calls using their proprietary, revolutionary design. They are located and manufactured in Gypsum, Colorado. Their calls were designed and battle-tested on some of the hardest hunted terrain on Earth. Check out elkreel.com. Use the promo code JScott and receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Go to www.elkreel.com. Okay, speaking of sanctuaries, with the Grand Canyon National Park right there, what did you notice anything different this year as far as elk moving on and off the park? Was it much of the same, or was it different in some ways?
I think it was much of the same. As soon as the pressure hit, it was just mass exodus. Just flat out mass exodus. You go drive through the park, and just the number of elk that are in the park is just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. The only thing that I think helped this year was that I think, again, because it was dry, the park ran out of water, and so some of those elk had just by default had to physically leave the park to come out, get some water on some of those water sources that were on the edge. But, it literally was you'd hear bugling, you'd go chase after it, bonk, you'd run right into the park boundary, and literally 150 yards over the park fence, they're going crazy. And then they're bedded down there, and then they get up in the evening and then just feed and work their way deeper into the park. So I think those cows, people talk about call-shy bulls, and granted, yes, I'll agree, if you've got a 9, 10-year-old bull or whatever, okay, he's been around the block, he knows the deal. But when you're dealing with 2.5, 3.5, 4.5-year-old bulls, really how call-shy and educated can they be? They follow the cues off the cows, and I think the cows know it. As soon as and Jay, Unit 9 has a lot of roads, which is good because it provides a lot of access, and having a lot of that vehicle traffic and that access around. Heck, there were several times where we were chasing really, really good mature bulls that literally were bedded 100 yards from the road. They were bedded on a ridge. I could literally chuck a rock onto the main road. They would bed in these places where they could keep track of what the vehicle traffic and the human traffic was. So the elk have gotten used to these roads. However, the problem is in June, in July, they might hear 1, maybe 2 vehicles a day. And then all of a sudden August hits, and now they're hitting 5 to 10 vehicles a day. And then all of a sudden bow hunting hits, or bow season hits, and oh my gosh, it's just a nonstop barrage of vehicles. Those cows know. You've got 10, 12, 15-year-old cows in there that are like, oh, it's time. Their alarm clock goes off, and they're like, well, it's time. We got to leave. And they just go right to the park, and they bail into it. But same thing. You got the park, you've got the Native American, you got the reservations there that are nearby. So there's places where those bulls and those cows know that they can just get up and leave and just go, and that's absolutely what happened again this year.
Do you think that it'll be one of those years where the first 2 weeks of October, when the pressure leaves and they actually get a chance to be unpressured, do you think that they're going to really kick it in gear over the next couple weeks? Do you think cows are going to miss entirely this year? Or they're just going to be late and maybe catch on the second cycle, which, should create a bunch of bugling here over the next couple weeks?
I think that will happen. We've typically over these past several years, I have actually several days after the season closes, whether it's a rifle season or archery season, and you absolutely can see that. Just like any unit, a lot of the, some of the hunters will fill early. Most of the hunters will fill by mid part of the season, and then 90 to 95% of the hunters will be done, a couple before the last day of the season. We saw that with archery season, and the same thing with the rifle. The rifle season, it was a ghost town these last couple days, and so the pressure really let off. Well, heck, I went to pull one of my game cameras yesterday, and in the middle of the day, several hundred yards into public land, and here is a 2 big bulls, a giant 5x5, or he was a crab 6, but just essentially a giant 5x5, another decent bull, a third decent bull, a bunch of cows. They were well onto the public ground, and they were in there bugling and chasing each other around. But again, we had that one big bull was locked down with that one cow. So I think you're going to see the same thing we see every year. Those cows, everything's going to peel out of the park. Everything's going to come out of the reservations, and they're just going to filter out across that unit again. We just got, when I say we got pounded by rain the other night, that storm was absolutely incredible. We had flooding, we had flash flooding through camp. The other camps got, literally stuff was floating. It was just insane amount of moisture. So every stock tank every wildlife tank is now full. Every mud puddle is full. So there is water everywhere. It seems like they've moved cattle off of some of the places, so there's a little bit less forage pressure. So I think you're going to see a lot of those animals come out. And yes, I absolutely believe that, as those cows get that, 8 to 9% body fat, they're going to go ahead and cycle. So some of them will be late. The question, and I think the deeper part of that question that you just asked is whether or not we will see just this absolute flurry of just screaming, bulls going crazy, going nuts, running around, just a late rut. But we have, that what we all dream of, just bulls going crazy in some of these units. I just don't know if we're going to see that. I'm going to try to stay in touch with a couple of the guys up there and just see what they hear over the next several weeks. But I don't know. Again, we've got a change in age class of the bulls that are in there kind of running the show. I mean, it's almost, from a forestry standpoint, anybody that knows silviculture and forest management, you hear people talk about a monotypic stand of trees. They're all the same age class. They all look the same. They're all the same height. They're all the same diameter. They all look the same. Well, it's almost like we have that with our bulls. It's just like a monotypic stand of bulls. I mean, the number of 3.5 and 4.5-year-old bulls and maybe a 5.5-year-old bull is just absolutely incredible. Every single bull, and that's what we were talking about with the rifle season. We had a mutual friend up there that drew his rifle tag this year after, I don't know, how 20 years? I don't know how many years he'd been putting in. But there was because all of us had been done, all of us, some of the regular guys up there were done with their clients and helping other people. We just all pitched in to help him. And that's what we did every day. We just power wade through all of these young bulls. You go hear a bugle and you got to chase it. And you'll run into 3 or 4 young bulls, and you hope that at the other end of it is a 350, 360, 370 plus type bull. Well, goodness gracious! I mean, just dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these just 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5-year-old bulls. So I think that age class change is going to. I saw it in Colorado, and more people are seeing it on public land in Colorado, where we just don't have that diverse age structure where you have those giant bulls, those 10-year-old bulls or 8-year-old bulls that are holding the harem with these 2, 3, 4-year-old bulls being the satellites. I just didn't see it this year. So I just don't know if we're going to have that real spike explosion of bugles. I think it might be more of the same. As those cows roll in, as soon as one rolls in, there's a 3-year-old bull or a 4-year-old bull that just, boom, I got you, and then you just move on,
Did you notice that the back points, the force fists and main beams, were they stunted from growth from all your trail cameras and all the observations on the ground that you saw, or did they seem to have nice back ends? And my question is ultimately getting to, drought conditions. Did the bulls look droughty, or did the antler configurations not show signs of drought?
I think, to be honest, I don't know. I think it might be inconclusive because, checking, again, friends of ours up there run extensive game camera surveys, probably the most extensive game. I mean, they probably make the state agency look, put them to shame as far as what they know about the herd dynamics. But when we went through, you start looking at all the different game camera footage and all the elk that we saw. Yes, I will say that there were a lot of bulls that just did not have significant backs or tops, whatever you want to say, that the last half of their antlers were unremarkable. However, on the flip side, there were other bulls that had awesome tops. They just had no fronts. So I think it's hard sometimes, I think, to tease out what the genetic expression of those antlers want to be to begin with. So like, for instance, if you got a bull that has just weak front and just tremendous tops, you're like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of backwards as far as how the growth cycle is. So that just may be how his genetics play out. He just has short front and he wants to throw big tops. But yeah, I mean, I will say that for the vast majority of the bulls that we saw, they just didn't have significant time length. I mean, there were several times where we'd get in on a bull, and my gosh, I mean, your initial sight, he's moving through the timber. I mean, he's super wide, he's got good mass, super wide. It looks like he's long, and then he steps out, and he's literally got 9-inch fourths, 5-inch fifths. He may have 9-inch thirds, and, I mean, there you are. I mean, he's got nothing for point. So it'll be interesting to see if those bulls survive all the late-season bull tags. If we have a good season, a good rain moisture, this fall. Now, I mean, I'm telling you, that place got hammered with rain these past several days. So if we get some good grass, and it maintains over the winter, and then we get a good spring and early summer in there, it will be very, very interesting for me to see if we have a spike in antler quality. But again, the age class is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like 2012 was really the last time we had really, really good antlers.
Yeah.
It was interesting talking to Monty this spring when he was out shed hunting. And for those of you who don't know, Chris and I have a mutual friend, Monty, that lives up there, and he does a ton of shed hunting. And, I remember talking to him in the spring, and he was just saying how dry and dusty, like he'd never seen it that dry.
Yeah.
And, it's definitely something to think about when, the crown jewel of Arizona, Unit 9, has always been that crown jewel. And, I wasn't up there this year, but I've noticed over the past, 5 or 6 years, it seems like every year the quality is declining. And, granted, there's still always going to be a couple, 4 or 5 top end bulls. One of the interesting things is a couple of those big top end bulls, talking about bulls traveling, that big bull Lefty that's got all the trash on the left side, he's a straight clean 6 on the right. He moved last year, 18 or 20 miles. He moved this year 18 or 20 miles, and actually moved out of the unit last year and moved out of the unit this year, as well as that big flare bull last year was summering the whole time in Unit 9 and, moved, 25 miles away to rut. And so, I think there is a little bit of, I guess, incongruent information as far as, in the summer, I don't know if incongruent is the right word. I might be outrunning my coverage there, but there is a disconnect with the bulls that are summering there, and a bunch of them, are park bulls, and then a bunch of them leave. But it used to be, you would go every day and see cookie cutter 350, beautiful 6, just beautiful 350 class, 355 class bulls. And over the last 4 or 5 years, it just seems like the cookie cutter has all of a sudden become that 325, 330 bull.
Yeah.
And, I know I will get messages and emails and people saying, oh, there's still giants there and all that. Now, I'm not really disagreeing with that, but what I'm saying is the overall quality of what I call cookie cutter, meaning every single day you see one just like this, and that used to be 350, 355, seems like is now 325, 330. And I was talking to another friend yesterday. It's like, sometimes we wish we could just ground check some of these, there's people out there that make statements of, why'd you shoot that bull? I saw 6 bulls that were way bigger than that. And sometimes you want to just be able to have the zapper gun and just be like, bam, bam, bam. Okay, let's go score them and see exactly what they were.
Yeah.
Because, the reality in my mind is the quality is slipping. And, I think that goes back to the number of bulls harvested on the late hunt. I mean, obviously the archery tags have been the same. The early rifle hunt flip-flop from muzzleloader early rifle, and I think they definitely kill some good, older age class bulls on those early firearm seasons. But drought I think plays a huge role in it too, and having moisture at the right time. I mean, I think, like you said, with having this moisture that we had, if we could have a big snow year and have a big early green up and a bunch of moisture kind of, late February, March, early April, kind of get everything going, we probably have another 2012 or have another 2005. And in Arizona, when we get those perfect moisture conditions, and I think it's a year and a half, maybe 2-year process of everything lining up correctly. We have a bunch of, those, all of a sudden those 330 bulls are at maximum potential, and they're 355, 360 type bulls.
Yeah, and you nailed it. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that, from year to year, if you've got optimal conditions, it's not uncommon for a bull to throw on an extra 30 inches from year to year. So, I mean, you have, and especially these younger age class where you're going from 3 to 4 or 4 to 5, that's where they're throwing on bones. So we could, absolutely, if all the stars align, we could absolutely see a really good jump in the quality of antlers. But then again, here we are, we're still talking about that monotypic age class stand, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But, when I said, these guys run, our friends up there run probably the most extensive game camera survey. Okay, and you nailed it. I mean, some of those bulls are going to pick up and move out. We know that they're going to move. And conversely, we know that there's probably some good bulls in adjacent areas that are going to pick up and move into the unit. But if you just look at it on the level with what was in there all summer, literally they categorized and sorted out and looked at and saved pictures of hundreds upon hundreds of bulls. And when they ran the numbers, 370 bulls and better, 370 and above, represented 0.8% of the population.
Now, one question I have about that before you go further is, are we talking summer velvet photos? Or okay, yes. So right total inventory from summer velvet inventory.
Right up until the first day of archery, yes. Yes. So again, we know that some of those bulls are going to pick up and move out, so that's going to decrease that number. But we also know that there could be some bulls that want to move in, so that may either balance that number or bump it. But regardless, it wasn't like, okay, the truly big bulls are 10% of the population. Okay, I think if we ran the numbers and it said, well, there's 10% of the bulls are 370 and above, oh my goodness, people would just fall all over themselves. I mean, that would have been epic. But when you're looking at it, and that's 0.8, that's crazy. It's just absolutely, again, I don't want to put words in Steve's mouth. I think you guys did a phenomenal set of series with Steve, the podcast with Steve Chappell. I think I would love to hear what Steve had. I know what he's going to say. I just talked to him, but I think it'd be good for the podcast listeners to hear Steve talk about it, because he did very, very well this year. They got into some really good bulls, like he always does. He's awesome. So, I mean, it'd be very interesting to see hear what Steve has to say, but it's just a different unit now. And so I think, if we're looking ahead, wanting to give folks a heads up, people that have been putting in for how many ever years for Unit 9, I think, Craig Steele, I mean, you guys had a great couple podcasts with him that, Craig watches the weather. I thought I was a weather hound. This guy, goodness gracious, he just needs to go work for NOAA and do the weather himself. But I mean, the guy that's all he studies. And I mean, he had some great maps, and he was pulling together some great imagery these past couple of years. And I think people like Craig Steele are going to be extremely valuable. People need to lean on him, because if you're going to put in for Unit 9 next year, brother, you better be looking at that weather and seeing what potential is. Otherwise, you're going to be burning 19, 20 points for a 330 bull.
Well, I couldn't agree more with your comments about Steve and with your comments about Craig. Those guys are hopefully going to be both on the podcast here this week, recapping what they found. But I think one thing needs to be pointed out, like what you're saying, is you spent all your time in Unit 9. What I'm hearing from a lot of guys that I've talked to just on the telephone is kind of overall all over the state, just not a really good year. And so, you talk about guys with 19, 20 points or what have you putting in for Unit 9. I think they just have to realize, and I think, I've caught a little bit of heat for this, and it's fine. I believe it, and so I'm going to say what I believe, and I believe overall our quality in Arizona is declining. And
well,
I think it's unit. I mean, it's all the units. I think it's all the units. Now, those factors, we talked about some of those factors, but I just think overall, I think on these late hunts, I think we're harvesting too many bulls, and I think we need to back off our late hunt numbers on bulls, and I think that would help. Granted, yes. I think that if we had great moisture cycles at the right time, I think we could buck some of that trend, but I still think it's on a downhill slide, and I think until something's done about it, we're going to continue to see it slide, whether it's 9, whether it's 10, whether it's 23, whether it's Unit 1. I think at some point, us as hunters, we're going to have to talk to our game and fish agencies and let them know what we want. One of the challenges is that there's a lot of hunters that they just want opportunity. They just want the ability to go hunt. And, you've seen it in Colorado where it went from, basically everything over the counter to then limited draw came in for elk. And I mean, people went crazy. There were, death threats and all sorts of stuff for the people that were making limited draw. And then all of a sudden, 4, 5, 6 years later, Colorado saw a huge spike in quality of bulls and probably, I would argue, quality of experience. And then they tapered it back now, and it seems like they're going back the other direction. And I may be speaking a little bit out of turn, but that's just my perception. So it's just interesting. I mean, let's face it, we'd all love to chase a nice bull, and we'd all like them to bugle. And it's just some of those years it's not going to happen, and some of those years it is. One thing I always run into, being an outfitter, is there's guys that have 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 24 points for elk, and they're going off of magazine articles from 15 years ago, and they have it in their head that, XYZ unit is the greatest unit there is, and they see, out of 100 tags, they see 1 or 2 bulls that make the magazine cover, and they think that it's just as good as it's always been. And I'm just going to, be on the record here of saying, and I know I'll catch a little bit of heat for it, but Arizona's elk quality is not what it used to be. I'm not saying that can't be overturned. I'm not saying that the tide can't be changed, but I'm saying my observation is the overall quality is not what it used to be.
And you are not the only person saying that. That's the thing. You might be the one that's out there on a podcast talking to, how many other hundreds of thousands. I don't even know how many listeners you've got now, but you might be the one that's out there publicly saying that in a public forum on this very popular podcast. But I'm telling you right now, I've talked to several people that have been there for years. One of them, one individual who's hunted Unit 9 since the very first day it was open, for the first year it was open. I mean, we had a very high-quality conversation about it, and he literally agrees 100% pretty much down the line with everything that we just said. He just, he's very active with the Wildlife Commission and watching what's going on, and that, you nailed it. The state, and it is what it is. We've actually had this conversation before. You've got this trend of, trophy hunters versus meat hunters, and this angst between the two, and how does it all balance out, etc. Well, apparently, the Wildlife Commission or Arizona, whatever, whether it's legislative, whether it's commission, whatever, the folks that want opportunity have really spoken up, and so Arizona seems to have moved in a direction that is more in line with opportunity hunts rather than high-quality hunts. And you just, nary the two shall meet. I mean, if you're going to go in there and provide several hundred, if not, 200-300 people an opportunity to go into a single unit and shoot a bull for meat, that's fine, but you're just not going to have to maintain the age class that's going to allow you to have the trophy potential with it. If the state wanted, and again, here I am armchair quarterbacking this, but again, my opinion means nothing.
Well, you are a, studied and certified wildlife biologist and behavior ecologist, so you do know what you're talking about.
I know what I'm talking about, but I don't live here, so my voice is kind of irrelevant.
I mean, the Game and Fish pays people good money to get, to manage, and here you are, every bit as qualified as anyone that they have, recommending their biology and some of the different patterns and such.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is this: when you do a late season hunt, the connotation of a late season hunt is it's a bull tag, and I'm there for meat. I don't care what the bull looks like. And so, in those previous years, that, you get through archery season, you've got some busted up bulls, and then by the time you get through rifle season, the bulls are busted up. And so if you're an archery hunter, or so let me just rephrase. If you're an early season hunter, most of the time, early season hunters are out there for quality. They're looking at antler quality, and they want a quality experience, but they also want a quality animal. That's what they're out there for. Well, when it comes to late season, and then the bulls are all busted up, that person has a fundamentally different outlook on what they're looking for. They don't care if they look at a bull and he's 10 years old and he's busted off both main beams and he's got one eye guard on one. They don't care. That he's got antlers. He's a bull. Shoot him. Okay, so that bull's dead. And it's just from a meat hunter standpoint. I'd almost say if the state if they wanted to increase opportunity, I would be curious to know what it would end up looking like if instead of having a high, you have your early season and then a bunch of late season, what if you just extended your early seasons and increased tags? Because the reason why I say that is I think during the early season, there is a fundamental difference in the behavior of a mature bull, and I think there's a fundamental difference in the tactics that are required to go after a mature bull, to where if someone goes in there and they just want a meat hunt, they're going to go in that unit, and the first 2.5-year-old 3x3 or 4x4 they see, it's a 2.5-year-old bull. Boom, it's dead. They've got their meat bull. But yet we've preserved some of the older age class animals because they did not spend the time, the skill set, or the tactics, or whatever you want to say. They did not execute the necessary actions to go after that upper age class animal. So I'm wondering if there wouldn't be a way that you could kind of balance opportunity with trophy by just changing when they provide those opportunities, because I think then you might actually be able to harvest a more random sample set of bulls, which then would generally, if you're talking about random statistically, hopefully what you end up with is a maintenance of your diverse age class. Does that make any sense, or did I just ramble?
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're saying. The one thing I would tell you is because Arizona tags and even late season tags are getting so hard to draw, I think the challenge is the late hunters become trophy hunters as well and are trying to shoot that older age class.
Oh, I got you.
Bull. I think they don't wait 7 years to just go shoot a 4x5 and dump it for meat. If they would, they would be going for a cow.
Gotcha.
So I think the dynamic is I think there should be 2 or 3 units in Arizona that they limit the number of late bull tags, keep the early tags the same, and cut the late tags in half. And have maybe 1 or 2 units, a couple of just crown jewel, 380, 390, 400-inch potential. I think it'd be awesome. Yeah. And then have some other units, maybe have some other mid-tier units that are even more opportunity. So then, there's a little bit for both. But, I mean, we could argue and we could talk till we're blue in the face about, it's easy for us to tell them what they should do, but all I can tell you is the quality overall statewide is declining, and there's a bunch of factors I think that play into that, but I think the overall scenario is we're shooting too many bulls, and it's age class. Our bulls are not getting to live old enough. I mean, it's pretty simple in my mind.
Yeah, and you nailed it when you said, I think this really is, it needs to rest squarely on the shoulders of the potential hunter. If you're going to apply and you're going to burn those tags, you need to understand what you're getting into. Now, I understand, granted, there are some outfitters out there that are going to continue to sell the legend of Unit 9. They're going to still, oh, yeah, we can get you a good bull. We'll get you a big bull. There's some big bulls out there. And then they send all their prospective clients the 1 or 2 pictures of a giant, who knows where they got the picture of, in the park, wherever. And they're gonna still try to bill Unit 9 as this premier crown, like you said, crown jewel. And so they're going to dupe some people, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. But I think it's really it's on the shoulders of the hunter to really spend the time to, what's the weather doing? What's the rain doing? How has it been? And just really start looking at the pictures, start going through all the outfitters and taking a look at their pictures and seeing what size bulls they really, truly are taking. Because I heard it last year and I heard it this year, and it just kind of drives me absolutely nuts. They draw the tag, and then at the end of the season, they're like, well, I'm pretty darn disappointed. This isn't what I put in for Unit 9, and this isn't what I was expecting, or this isn't what, the type of hunt that I was looking forward to. Well, okay, obviously none of us can do anything about the weather. You put your application in early before all the antler growth is even really kicked in, so that's kind of a crapshoot. It's a gamble. We can't do anything about the weather. But when you know ahead of time that the previous years haven't been that great, and you continue to put in hopes, well, you got to understand that, like you said, some of the quality is declining. Yes, some of it has to do with the weather. We can't control that. Unfortunately, other parts of it just happen to do with how Arizona's managing their unit and the number of tags in there. So you look at in the late winter, you're looking at the draw, you're like, oh, they're only going to offer, 100 tags in here. Well, yeah, for your season, how many tags did they offer for the late season? That's what you need to start paying attention to.
Yeah, for sure. I got to see firsthand up in Utah on the beaver unit, and I don't know the numbers specifically, but the archery tags, there was only 7 tags, 1 non-resident, 6 resident. I believe there was only like 8 early rifle tags. I believe there's only like 6 muzzleloader tags, and I want to say there's like, I'm just wild guess, I think there's like 10 or 12 late season tags, and maybe it's even less than that. In a unit, Chris, that's Unit 9 and the beaver, the beaver seemed bigger to me. And
really?
So I saw super high quality, lots of 340 to 370 bulls, lots of them, more, solid bulls than any public land hunt I've ever been on, including any unit in Arizona. And so I think although they shoot spikes and they shoot cows during the archery season, it's over the counter. I saw lots of solid 350, 360, 370 bulls. And I think that's just from age class. I think that's from not, wiping out the herd. And while every year elk season I'm critical of the Arizona Game and Fish, I'd like to say I do think Arizona does, is one of the best states for managing their wildlife. So I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer, but it's, I'm just saying what I've been witnessing, and I'm witnessing an overall decline. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I've said it before, is, and I talk to hunters all the time, just because you've waited 18 or 20 years for whatever tag it is, whether it's, bighorn sheep, mule deer, elk, whatever it may be, that does not mean that you're going to get a trophy animal. That does not mean that you deserve a trophy animal. All it means is you had enough points to draw that tag.
That's right.
So I think, you hear people say, well, I had 20 points. I don't want to waste it on this unit. I don't want to waste it. I say, okay, in my mind, what are the hunt dates? What is the moon doing?
Yeah.
What is the trend of the unit? And what are your trophy expectations? What are you expecting out of the hunt? Everybody wants a 400-inch bull, but how many are there in the unit? Oh, there's only 2 maybe in the whole unit?
Yeah.
And maybe one of them's going to leave and go 25 miles away and be gone? well, we need to ramp down our expectations and get a little bit more realistic in, okay, there's a lot of 330 to 340 bulls. Anything over 350, from what I'm hearing you say in Unit 9, is a trophy. And if we took, the 100 bull tags, I wonder how many bulls got harvested that were gross and a legitimate, real score over 350. I'm betting on a year like this, maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah, hey, tops.
Maybe
yeah. No, I'll agree with that. Tops.
So I mean that's less than 10%, of bulls just being over 350. So I think hunters, going into next application season, I think you just got to weigh your overall expectations, and then I think you've got to weigh in your capabilities. Are you in shape?
Yes.
Are you a crack shot? Are you in shape? Do you have targeted strategies from the Roe hunting resource? I mean, do you have a plan? Have you hired? Are you going guided or are you going unguided? Are you taking this hunt seriously enough to kill a 370 plus bull?
Well, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean that's a solid point. And I want to talk about something here in a second, but I mean that's a solid point. Do you have a plan? I had experience with one guy this year that he, by the time they ended the hunt, the archery hunt, his attitude was, why do I need to hire a guide? We can do this ourselves. We can do this DIY and have just as much success, blah blah blah. Because I can get a shooter. Well, okay, the quality of shooter that the guy was talking about is a 320, 330, maybe a 340 bull. Well, yeah. If that's all you want, if that is the bull that you want, oh my goodness, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm an outfitter. You're an outfitter. Okay. Well, I say I'm an outfitter. I guided this year. This is my first year doing it officially, down here with a client. So, yeah, if all you want is a quality experience, you just want a 320, 330, 340 bull, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't know if you need to hire anybody. Just come out and have a good time. If you want something of that upper echelon, if you want that, the top 1% of bulls that are in there, or even top 5%, you need a plan. And you need assistance, and you need help, and you need to. That's a complete different mindset. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's some guys that are saying, I drew 20. I've waited 20 years. I drew the tag. I should be able to just hire anybody, and we'll just go out and we'll go kill one. No, that doesn't happen.
And I think too. When you're looking at using your points, you have to say, what kind of hunt do I want?
There we go.
Is the quality of bull at the end of the hunt all that I care about, and is that the ultimate measure of success? And if it is, there's certain outfitters that that you may choose. If there's you say, I want to just have a great time, I want to have a calling, I want to have a bugling hunt, I want to have bulls coming in, I want to have active strategies for making plays and learning how to elk hunt, then there's outfitters for that. So, and what's hard is picking an outfitter where you can have a mixture of both. Do you want to sit water, or are you the guy that says, I don't want to sit water, I don't care what's going on, I'm not sitting water, I want to run and gun? So, I think as hunters, I think you have to do the research, and you have to say, ultimately, what do I want out of waiting 20 years? Is it all about the size of bull? Or is it, I'll give a little bit on size of bull if I don't have to sit water? Or I'll give a little bit of size of bull if I can run and gun hunt the whole time? Or I want to sit water, and that's how I want to do my hunt. There's certainly outfitters that are more, I want a glassing hunt. I want to glass bulls and spot and stock. I want to put an earbud and I want the outfitter to sit up on a knob and direct me and get me in as many opportunities. I mean, so there's a lot to it, and there's way more than just, a picture of a bull and what did it look like and how did the hunt go.
Well, and forgive me, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to hammer on that because that is the thing. And again, talking to one of the guys up there this year, I mean, just phenomenal individual, phenomenal outfitter. The guy's he's a legend up there. And we sat, we talked, and that's one thing that he and I noticed is just, okay, we've this first part of this discussion, we've really been hammering the big bulls, the trophy bulls, the guys that want the trophy. Well, okay, so probably a lot of you are just DIYers are like, who gives a crap? I don't care about trophy hunting. All right, well then let's segue. Let's flip this off and say, okay, like you just said, okay, what opportunity do you want? Because there are those other guys that are saying, you know what, I don't care about how big of a bull I get. I just want an absolute awesome experience, because you put in for 20 years and you're like, okay, depending on the mindset, you might be putting in 20 years saying, you know what, when I show up, I just want to be in bulls every day. I just want to have bugling like I've never heard bugling before. I just want to have that experience with where somebody calls in a bull, or me or somebody else, or an outfitter or whatever, guide, where that bull is 10 yards and just screaming my ears off. That is what I want. I'll tell you, as much of I will self-identify as quote-unquote a trophy hunter. I look at age class, not necessarily the antler quality. You know me, some of the bulls that I've called in down there, they're 10-year-old bulls, and they don't score for anything because they've got some weird club or hook or, just like Twizzler or Captain Hook or whatever. They're 10, 12-year-old bulls, but they don't score. Man, I would fill my tag in a second because it's a 10-year-old bull. But so I'm more of a trophy quote-unquote hunter. But I'm telling you, it's getting more and more difficult for me to find enjoyment in just going after score, because I think some people lose perspective on what we're actually doing out there and what we should be doing out there, and that's having a good time. There are some people that get caught up on score and they just absolutely get teed off of the fact that, well, there's just no big bulls out here, and I didn't get any big bulls, and I didn't see any good big bulls, so I'm disappointed. Well, okay, if score is all that you focused on, then everything that we just talked about, I think, really needs to be in the forefront of your mind. Weather, numbers, the whole 9 yards. But, okay, let's talk to the guy now that says, I just want a quality experience. If that's the case, I think Unit 9 is going to be awesome still. Because, yes, I think the drought and the dry weather really impeded a lot of the behavior and a lot of the activity that people saw. But that fluctuates year to year. That will change. And quite honestly, I think if we get one of these years where we have good moisture and the cows cycle in the way they normally cycle, and all of a sudden we have this glut of cows coming into cycle, you have a monotypic stand of age class of bulls in that unit, oh my goodness, they are going to be cranking. Because it's just going to be nonstop competition of bulls trying to find their own particular cow. So I think for those guys that are interested in just a quality hunt, a fun hunt, a bugling hunt, a calling hunt, that type of deal, I think if the weather hits it right, I think it'll be a phenomenal, phenomenal unit.
Yeah, Chris, I've got a couple things to add here. Everyone wants to know how my beaver hunt went, and so I've got kind of firsthand. So I go into the beaver hunt in Utah. I drew the only non-resident tag in beaver. I had 16 bonus points. There was 172 non-residents that applied for the one tag. Because there's only one tag, it goes completely random. I draw the tag. My buddy Tony lives up there and knows the unit really well. And he tells me, you're not going to believe the quality of bulls up here. And, at the time, I was kind of like, yeah. And then, as I started seeing trail camera photos, and I quickly realized that yes, it was a very high quality as far as trophy potential that I had. And so as the summer went on, I got more and more excited. And as I started seeing some of the different trail camera photos, I quickly realized that this wasn't just going to be a fun elk hunt. And so I kind of transitioned from, oh, this is way better than what I was thinking, I went from I'm just going to go chase bugles and have a great hunt and just, have the best elk hunt I've ever had to there's a couple of bulls here that I really need to get serious and, I really have a chance to kill these elk. And one bull in particular I kind of set my sights on, and, Tony and his brother and his dad would go out every morning and every evening, and they would come back with phone scope video of a new 350, 360, 370, and maybe even, 375, 380s types of bulls every single day. And sometimes all three of them had bulls that they had found that were of that quality.
Good,
but there were a couple bulls in particular that were super big, and I've shot 2 bulls over 400. I've shot 3 bulls over 390. So I knew that this was an opportunity that I could notch my tag on another giant. And so very early on, after arriving there, I realized that, this is not an opportunity that comes by very often, and I had a chance to shoot a giant. And so I focused in and specifically hunted a specific area targeting a bull. And looking back, not having filled my tag, having 2 opportunities with that bull, one at 5 yards and one at 10 yards, and not being able to fire a shot is so disheartening. But on the other hand, I had an unbelievable hunt because a step here, a step there, a second here, a second there, I would have an absolute giant bull on the ground. And, the old saying, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. Some of that plays into it. And yeah, people will say, oh, well, yeah, a step here, a step there. Well, literally full draw 2 situations, a step here, 6 inches of movement here, and on the other situation, a 6 or 8 inches of movement there. I've got a 5 or a 10 yard shot at one of the biggest bulls a giant. Yeah. Or I could have said, you know what, I think these 2 bulls, they're going to be hard to kill and very tough. I want to go the other route, and I want to just go into a bugling frenzy. I want to dive in with the elk and mix it up with them and have the greatest calling and bugling hunt and just have a grand old time. I didn't even actively go in the field calling and doing my thing, but a couple times. I was either glassing or listening or just trying to hear the specific bull bugle and go after that bull. So, I bring all this up in the fact that everybody has to choose what they want to do. Now, when I have 18 or 19 points in Colorado, and the biggest bull in some of those units might be 330, 340, I'm going to take a different complete approach on that hunt, and I'm going to say every single day of the hunt, I am not going to glass. I'm just going to go dive in with the elk and make it a calling hunt.
Yeah, and have fun.
Because, okay, so what? I kill the biggest bull in the unit, and he's 350, and yeah, that's a big bull for that unit. I would rather go into that hunt and just go, call in 5 points one after another and, hunt for 20, 25 days and finally shoot one, at the last day that's a, 5x6 and say it's the, greatest bugling and calling hunt that I've had. Where I contrast that and compare that with the beaver hunt that I just had, I could have done that on the beaver and had, unbelievable calling and call-ins and experiences, but I chose to go after, a target bull, and I didn't get him killed. So people ask me, how was your hunt? I say it was one of the greatest elk hunts I've ever been on. And there were days when I didn't even hear or see an elk. But I think you have to kind of weigh in on where are you at as a hunter, what are you looking for, and, what are your objectives. And so, I think people can transition, but I think when they're putting in for Arizona, they need to figure out what is it that they want. Do they want to focus on one stinking bull and potentially go the whole hunt and only see the bull twice?
Yeah.
Or do they
Well,
want to just come and enjoy themselves? And some people like me enjoy the trying to kill that specific bull. And then when you don't get it done, instead of saying it was a horrible hunt, it was one of the greatest hunts I've had.
yeah. I mean, if I use my hunter for this year as an example, I mean, he was, when we talked all before season, it was, I want 370 or better. I want 370 or better. And he legitimately, he's kind of, I mean, on a different scale, he's similar to you. He's killed some really good bulls, and on public land and on private land, but he's DIY stuff. I mean, he's killed some really good bulls. So he figured, you know what, he drew this tag this year on the random draw. So he wasn't even really, quote unquote, supposed to draw this tag this year. It was kind of a random deal. He was like, oh my gosh. He goes, this is an opportunity for me to kill a giant. And so that's what he wanted to do. So again, that's what I focused on, and given the fact that we're dealing with 0.8%, or I at that time I thought it was 0.5, but it doesn't matter. I said, we're dealing with a handful of bulls, and those handful of bulls, the ones that are going to be here, the ones that live here, that are not going to move out of the unit, not going to walk away or whatever, the ones that live here, they live in a couple certain spots. And if you want that size of bull, there's going to be a certain type of hunt that is just, we're going to grind it out. And so, one of those tactics this year, everything, early, the only good bulls that were being killed on water, because that water was the limiting factor. No one was bugling, no one was talking. They were just coming into water. And so literally when by fluke accident, I mean, all of a sudden one of the best water holes, mud holes, tanks opened up. The hunters that had hunted it before killed, 330, 320, 330 bull on it, and they went home. Well, all of a sudden for a full day, no one's hunting this just sweet honey hole of a tank that literally one of the big bulls, more than one of the big bulls, there were a couple big bulls that were hunting, they were living around there. They're going to be there. So I grabbed my ground blind, threw that ground blind in there, and I told the hunter, I said, we're sitting this water hole, and of course, first he's like, I don't want to sit a water hole. That's just not the type of hunt that he wanted. And so after we kind of talked, I said, here's the deal. We want to run and chase bugling bulls. Well, they're not bugling, number one. Number two, you want a certain class of bull. Well, this is the tactic that we need at this moment to try to maximize that opportunity. So we sat water. Well, again, he is not somebody that wants to sit water. He goes stir crazy in a blind. But he gutted it out because he knew that was what needed to happen. Now, the other thing, too, is because this was such a prime location, I mean, my gosh, he had, I don't know how many, 320, 330 bulls coming in, broad daylight, 20 yards from him, flailing around in the water, carrying on, bugling. It was just a nonstop action activity center to where it was fun for him to enjoy. But by the same token, again, we're talking of tactics. We're talking about what you want. What type of hunt do you want? Well, if you are the type of guy that says, inches are all I care about, well, then you have to understand that very well may entail tactics that are not fun. I'll be the first to admit, you and I talk about it. I do not like sitting behind glass. I just don't. You are unbelievable at what you can do behind a set of Swarovskis up on top of some of these knobs and these bluffs and stuff. I mean, you can sit up there for days on end and pick that thing apart 8 weeks from Sunday and identify every single bull that's out there. It drives me absolutely nuts. I would rather be in the pines running and just going and weaseling them out, But again, if all you care about is inches, then you're going to have to suck it up and play the tactic that is going to give you the best opportunity for those inches. It may not be a fun hunt, but it may be the most productive for that goal. But if you want to have a fun hunt, my gosh, the opportunities are out there. It's just, what is your priority? And regardless of what your priority, you've got to remember it's supposed to be fun. You know what I mean? So right. I think Unit 9 has the definite potential to be a fun unit. I just don't know if it's going to be one of those numbers units in the future or for very much longer. We'll see. I don't know.
Let's take another quick break here. PhoneScope is a company that makes custom-molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. It is simple to text photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. Get yours now by using the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope, that's PhoneSkope.com, or on Instagram at PhoneScope. I have known the owners of the Outdoorsmans in Phoenix for over 20 years. They are the authority on optics and hunting gear. Outdoorsmans is the leading designer and manufacturer of high-quality tripods, mounting accessories, and pack systems for all hunters. Their customer service is the best in the business. Go to outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065 and use the J. Scott promo code to receive 10% off any products. Okay, you're headed east, headed back to Kansas. What's in your near future? What do you have going on, looking forward to at home?
Well, like you say, no rest for the wicked. Literally, I am rolling up north. I've got to meet my wife in Colorado, drop off computer and stuff to her. She's in a project, and literally tomorrow morning, I'll probably just stay the night there tonight, just because it's going to be a long haul. But as soon as I roll into Colorado, it is literally dump the camper, unload, laundry, recharge camera batteries, and just literally, I am diving head first, getting ready for whitetail. We've got some hunters coming in at the end of October into beginning of November. And this year, unfortunately, we had a pretty catastrophic flood that went through, and my guess, significantly altered one of our properties, at least the river bottom portion of our property. So it happened while I was already in Colorado, so I haven't even seen it. I'm literally going back home to discover just how bad the carnage is from this historic flood. And then on another property, it's going to be trying to just take inventory of what we have, because it's going to be interesting because of crop prices and commodity prices and all sorts of other details. I don't know what the landowner's going to be planting as far as fall, or if he's going to be planting in a winter wheat, and what the harvest looks like. So I'm going to be getting out there doing inventory on that, trying to help the harvest if I can, because I'd really like, if they're not going to plant the fields in winter wheat, where I am, winter wheat is king. Winter wheat grows up, 4 to 5 inches or so in the, 3 to 5 inches in the fall, stays really green, high protein, high palatability all the way in through winter. So all the deer pile onto it when the weather's nice. And then in the spring, that's the place where all the turkeys congregate. So that makes our turkey season really, really successful. Well, our landowners may or may not be planting much winter wheat this fall. So if they don't, I'm going to be really trying to figure out if we could get in just cover strips, just some food plot, essentially. So it's going to be interesting. It's just going to be diving headfirst into getting into whitetail season, and it might be a whirlwind month just to try to get these guys